So the next one is sort of a survey application of congruent triangles and how you can do indirect measurement using congruency and similarity, right? Hutchins Lake is a long, narrow lake. Its length is represented by AB. In the diagram shown below, Dimitri designed the following method to determine its length. First, he paced off and measured AB and BC, so he knows these two measurements. Then, using a transit, he made sure that PCA the measure of PCA was equal to the measure of ACB. So he basically made sure he knew those two angles were congruent. Then he marked point D on this line so that he would know that DC was equal to BC. So he knew these two were congruent, right? And so he basically took measurements and made sure that these things, he set it up so he knew these things would be congruent, these things would be congruent. So he sort of paced off a mirror image of this. And because of that, remember another thing that we can mark right here is that AC is congruent to itself. So we now know he paced off congruent triangles. And by pacing off congruent triangles, then he can say that AD, however long AD is going to be however long AB is. So you need to write that down in words for A. Is he correct? Absolutely. Why? Justifying your answer. Because he constructed it so that they would be congruent by side, angle, side. And if they're congruent by side, angle, side, then corresponding parts are congruent, which means AD is going to be equal to AB. Now, Andrea claimed she could find the length of AB without siding angle ADC. So suppose AC is 500 meters. AC is 500 meters. BC is 200 meters. BC is 200 meters. And measure of angle ACB is 100 degrees. What is the length of Hutchins Lake? So this particular problem is one where you have to kind of reach back into your Math 2 and remember some of the different trig rules you learned there. We actually didn't do that in class. So if you can do this on your own, it's going to be an extra credit problem. And if you can't, that's fine. This one is not one that you have to do, but just as a hint, think back to Math 2 and the different rules you learned about triangles. If you have your notes from last year, they might be a help, or you can Google that on the internet for extra credit.